Okay, joining us now to talk about the latest on Gaza and the ongoing talks is political analyst Jadan Horyn. Welcome to the program. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Okay, so while much of the world is focused on rebuilding Gaza, Trump says Palestinians need to leave. And will he find a receptive audience with Netanyahu?
Most likely. I mean, what we learned from today's press conference really was a kind of confirmation to the idea that the United States' position is that Gazans in some way, shape, or form are complicit in Hamas's atrocities, and by having voted back in 2007 in their last election, and the only election that took place in the Gaza Strip, for Hamas to be their government, that ultimately that they have to bear a cost for that. And the question now becomes, will the U.S.'s regional allies, whether it be Jordan or Egypt, eventually buy into this negotiated position of saying that, you know, up to 1 million, maybe more, Gazans simply can't return, because the rebuilding will take a very long time, one, and two, that there's really nothing for them to return to, and they need to be sure that Hamas and its allies and supporters don't once again take root in the Strip.
Okay, well, but what about the UN and so many other nations that have mandated the two-state policy? Is this just going to be thrown out the window now? Don't you expect there's going to be massive pushback on this? Massive.
I mean, I do and I don't, because the state of the world is much different than it was before the crimes against humanity that Hamas perpetuated. You know, there was no state of war. It was crimes against humanity. It included nationals of over 30 different countries. And because of that, there is a new calculus. Certainly the UN and its resolutions, they inform. But the reality on the ground is that Palestine and the Palestinian state is demonstrably different than Gaza and how Gaza has been governed by the government run by Hamas. And because of that differential, simply speaking, what will happen in Gaza is not the same as what will happen with an eventual Palestinian state. And I think a negotiated solution with that government, which has been in general supportive of Israeli policy, or at least silent on it, is much different than what will happen to the Palestinians who resided in Gaza.
Removing Hamas from the equation, I get it. Okay, so, you know, this just happened in the past several minutes. U.S. President Trump saying that he is looking at the possibility of sending U.S. military troops to Gaza. What are your thoughts on that, and what could that do to that powder keg?
Yeah, I think what the Trump administration is trying to do here is, what they're trying to do is ensure that Gaza itself does not somehow get absorbed into Israel as what the international community and many, I won't say conspiracy theorists, but many people believe is the ultimate goal of the Netanyahu government,
right,
and instead somehow become a, in the old way in which the UN operated, UN mandates, in this case a U.S. ceasefire or no-go zone, where Israel does not govern it, but instead is somehow militarized by the United States. And there is some, that announcement kind of comes after some speculation within the Trump administration about the best way to administer Gaza and making sure that Netanyahu and a government that Arabs will not work with in a situation that will be untenable for any future settlement is not put in place. So I think what you're seeing there is probably a chance for a negotiated solution. Unfortunately, the U.S. military might not be what most people expect.
Yeah, and I think back to what candidate Trump said too, sending U.S. military to a place like Gaza seems to fly in the face of every single thing he said when he was running for president.
Yeah, it's almost like he wants the U.S. Military here to act as peacekeepers, as opposed to a weaponized or armed force. And again, I think if we look at the pictures, which I'm sure you guys have endless amounts of B-roll relating to just the utter destruction that the president did mention, creating or allowing people to return to a situation like that, I think would be both unacceptable from a humanitarian point of view, but also one where unless there are resources brought to bear to really clear the rubble and to allow a state where they could do rebuilding, and certainly the U.S. government doesn't want to be funding, NGOs, as we see from the cuts to USAID, et cetera, probably the best pathway, or the one where they'll have the most control, would be the U.S. military for lines of command back to the president.
Jordan, I just have time for one more question. I kind of want to wrap it into this. I want to your thoughts on the fact that the administration is considering the possibility of getting rid of USAID, and secondly, Trump and Netanyahu had been so close in the first administration until the very end. especially when Netanyahu congratulated Biden for the victory. Have those two mended fences, and what is going to happen if AID goes away?
Yeah, I think taking them separately very quickly, the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump is one of understanding of personalities and mutual respect at a minimum. I do think there's a personal affinity that they have towards each other that has been diminished some, but I don't think it's gone. USAID. Look, I think the Trump administration views it as a way to funnel money to NGOs and doesn't see it actually reaching its objectives. $300 million for a dam in Afghanistan that provided no water, $700 million to people that couldn't use a power plant because they couldn't supply fuel, et cetera. Right. That it's graft, it's waste, it's potential influence peddling. It's everything that our enemies claim the United States does that in fact we have done. And in that respect, I think the Trump administration is looking at a different way to do this, wrapping it into the State Department, putting it within the frame of national interest. Maybe that will work. Maybe it will cause unforeseen problems. We don't know.